Hello there, YouTube. It's Wednesday, May 11th, 2022, and I thought I'd do a video on cleaning the mating surfaces of your engine. Right? Every engine has mating surfaces. Look, if you like what you see, click the bell, because at some point I'm going to go live. I'm going to try to start this car. We don't know what's going to happen, so that's why going live is going to be a kind of a fun event. In addition, any tools, products that I use, special tools and products that I use in this video, I have links down below. I tell you in the video whether I like it or I don't like it. That's for darn sure. In this video, you'll know my opinion about all these different products. So I think we should just get started on this and talk about this particular thing right here. This is the Scotch-Brite pad. Let's start with that. The 7448 has been my go-to pad since the beginning of this whole project, right? And I've used the red pad when necessary, rarely on mating surface. Actually, I never have used the 7447 or the maroon pad on mating surfaces. I've used it on the outside of things. I used it a little bit, I think, on the intake manifold. On the inside of that, you'll see a video on that in the future. But my go-to has always been these Scotch-Brite pads. Another method that can be used is using a carbide scraper. This is the carbide scraper I purchased. Another method that's often used is guys are using these 3M Roloc bristle discs. They're saying that they don't harm the aluminum surfaces. In this video, I'm going to use some aluminum and I'm going to use some steel blue layout fluid. And I covered it, the aluminum block, with layout fluid. I also drilled a hole. One of the problems I think with this type of disc, okay, Scotch-Brite, what I'm thinking is going to happen is, if you notice, it can go below the surface. So let's see if I can show that. You see? So what's going to happen is this thing's going to, when you're putting down on it, you see how it's catching that edge? I think you're going to round your edges. And let's just see if this, all by itself, no pressure really, just going to lay it on there like that. And then I'm just going to evenly put a little bit of pressure, hardly anything at all, and I'm going to just turn it a couple of times. I see some little scratches. See that? Now whether or not those scratch, now let's, how about if we just brush it? Okay. Okay. Now let's take the carbide scraper, and you have to keep this flat, because if you catch it a little bit like that, you're going to put a big old gash in there. So that's one of the hardest things about this, is being able to keep that flat. And then you just go like this and just kind of scrape your surface. So I'm going to do that on this side here. And then I'll pretend, you know, that I'm taking it on a different angle. But I want to stay with right here just so I can compare any scratches. One way that guys I see they pull back with these to make it a little bit safer. Didn't really scratch it, now did we? Alright, so now let's try the Rotodisc. Now, did that leave scratches per se? Yeah. We'll take an even closer look because I'm more curious, you know, whether or not it would round off an edge. But I'm having trouble holding that. I got to put it in the vise. I can't do it here, guys. I'm going to have to go put this in a vise. I would have to say that the roller disc does not take off much material. Although it does take off material. There's no doubt about it. It does. I want to take a closer look at all of this, but you can see how it will swirl. All right. I can still see the original grooves in the material, but, and then right here, you can see it right there. Right here is where I bared down on it. So you can see it rounded that edge, which means it would do the same thing to your ports around that. This back half over here, the first method is I'm going to use the 3M pad, the maroon pad. And why not use a block of wood? If you're going to do it, you want to have it flat. And this is not a real flat one, but we're going to pretend that we're doing it with a flat surface. Let's see how it does if I bear down on a corner. Which you would never probably do. So I went against it this way, so you can see there are some small scratches. I bared down on it right here. You can see all the red. It didn't leave any divot. But here I see that it did not do anything on the edge. This is the disc, and this over on this side is with the maroon pad. Let's do the other side using the gray pad. I have another one of these bars, and I put my pad on the back. And I'm not using any solvents, I'm not using any oils or anything, so you know, this is about as rough as it's going to get. If you were using WD-40, it could be a different story. But this is the lightest, and I'm going to go ahead and use the block to keep it flat, or to help me keep it flat. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm going against the grade. All right. All the blue is gone. I wouldn't say that that's scratched in any way. Here's where I tried to bear down, right there. Impossible, so I did it right in front of this in there. No way that was going to do anything. Would you call these scratches? This side is unfinished. It did not take the metal off really. You can even see this little piece of metal right there. It didn't take that off. It took all the blue dye off. That's that side. Now I'll just flip it over so you can see the side that was untouched. And that's an untouched side. Okay, now let's look at this other side. This was the 3M Roloc disc. That's the damage it did in a short amount of time. The red pad, that's what it did. Factory finish looks the same as it did, same roughness. It did not really take material away. I would say that even that red pad using a flat guide is just fine. There's your difference. Rolo disc, just a 3M Scotch-Brite. The red one will leave slight scratches. The gray one really does not, but it'll take you a lot longer with the gray one. So I think that this is useful for those wondering, because I've been wondering, what is safe? What methods are safe for removing gasket material? And I can't say that the Rolo disc is, unless that's the roughness you want, you know. So that's the other thing you have to figure out. If this roughness is okay to manufacturing, then maybe, but obviously it's taken off material, where these other pads don't really take off material, especially the gray one. You can see that gray one did not take off any material. And that's why I chose the gray one. So anyone wondering why I chose to use the gray one throughout this engine process, the only time I've used the red one is on the outside of a surface. Like the outside of the block, for example. I have not used it on any mating surfaces. I have used this gray pad on the mating surface. And I use a block whenever possible, because that's the stuff that'll happen, right? You saw what it did over here, right there. Remember, you guys have to be careful. If you're going to use those Roloc discs, that's what can happen. And I don't think you want that to happen. Another thing people will use is a solid brass wheel. I don't recommend it because it will actually leave a brass kind of a finish on your material. And in addition to that, these little pieces of brass are going to end up in the engine and caught on something. So I don't recommend that either. Basically, this is everything I used when I prepared all my deck surfaces. Another thing I did is I have this wooden block, just a little wooden block, and I stapled on some, I think this is 400 grit sandpaper, wet dry, and I used this little thing right here just sometimes, like if I felt like there was something on edge, right? Because this will flatten, you know, and it will actually take off material. So, you know, it's going to actually flatten whatever it is. So, like those little burrs that you saw on, you know, on this block. Sometimes there's little imperfections, or maybe it got nicked, and so it's, you know, it's a little bit up, you know, where the nick is. But so I did use this acetone and brake clean. You know, I got my recipe somewhere. I'll put it in the description, I guess. WD-40 and parts cleaner. So this is my homemade brake clean, the acetone and the .4, and this is the expensive brake clean. So now I did want to cover one more thing. When you're cleaning your block, if you're just using a pad, you're pushing. Do you see how you're compressing? There's like no way, you know, there's no way you're going to be able to do this evenly. By just introducing a block to it like this, you see, no matter how hard you push, at least you're even. Okay? Now, I did want to say that whenever there was gaskets or materials, I did use my scraper. And, you know, pulling it, you can see it will leave little scratch marks, right? And I mean, I'm not even doing anything. But if you're real careful, and I use, you know, headgear with binoculars basically, is what I'm doing. And so I'm looking really careful to make sure I'm keeping this flat against the surface, you know, as best I can. And I'm only removing the junk. But I still prefer this. So you saw me when I was cleaning the block. I went from this in 2 seconds right back to this, or well, actually to my piece of plastic. You know, that was what I used mostly. And you can buy these big giant sheets for just a couple of dollars, and when you break it off, you can sharpen it with a file. And so you can scrape all day long on your aluminum, and you can see it does not remove any material, but it sure does clean. I don't care how hard you try. There's just no way you're gonna do it. Right? You can't scratch it. So this is like the safest thing I did. And when you throw a little bit of brake clean into it, right? Just a little bit of brake clean and your stuff and your pads with the backing. What I really like about the pad, in addition to what we've already talked about, is that these little fibers will go in between the machined grooves, right? Those little machine grooves. Those little fibers go in between. This will just scrape everything to that point. Or your scraper, whatever you're doing, will only bring it to the point of the highest point, which is the aluminum. But we also need to clean in between those machine points in order to get the real, you know, the RA factor, their roughness. So the gasket material makes a great contact. That's the whole idea behind it. That's it. I mean, that's how I've been cleaning everything as far as all my parts. I just kind of wanted to document that, maybe share what I've learned in doing that, because, you know, this is probably not what you really want. You know, this is the red again, and this is the gray. hands down, the gray worked for me, so I think it's going to work for you guys too. So I just wanted to share how I prepared all my mating surfaces in this car. So, hopefully things seal up nice and tight. All right, until the next video,